What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Every year in every draft that you participate in, you have to choose, which player am I going to take? Now that means you have to choose between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ADPs, and you have to go and select a singular player. Today, I have 5 different situations of really tight ADPs within, back to back or within a few picks of each other. Situations that you will find yourself drafting in the upcoming month. So today, let's talk about our top 5 would you rather ADPs. All right, so the first players I want to talk about are picks 6 and 7 overall, RBs 2 and 3, Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. Now, this is tough because when you look at the statistics from last year, they were pretty much the same. Bijan finished with 976 yards. Breece Hall was at just under 1,000, 4 to 5 rushing touchdowns. 487 yards through the air, 591, 4 touchdowns through the air. So they were pretty much statistically the same. Breece Hall finished as the RB4 in half PPR leagues, and Bijan was the RB9. So at the end of the day, we have to decide, who do we want our team to start off with? Who do we want our franchise guy to be? And if I was in this spot, my gut pick is going to be Bijan Robinson. Now, the reason for this is there are red flags with each guy, and running backs are scary, but I think Bijan can just have a nuclear season. Last year, Arthur Smith was a terrible offensive mind. I mean, he ran the absolute worst. He played Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson. He played these guys way too much. You need Bijan Robinson on the field more than what he was last year, and I think there is zero chance he's not out there just a ton in 2024 for the Falcons. And you have to acknowledge it. I know each quarterback is coming off a torn Achilles, but Kirk Cousins coming off a torn Achilles is very different than Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is 40 plus years old. Kirk Cousins is relatively old for a quarterback, but in his mid 30s, that's a 5-year difference. Aaron Rodgers hasn't even been around the team facilities. He's been off doing his crazy retreats. And just to me, look, with Bijan, you have no significant injury to the knee. You have I think, a better team overall, a team that almost made the playoffs last year. I would say at this point, a better or more proven quarterback, although coming off an injury. He's just the next 2,000-yard guy. He's awesome. He's the next Barkley. He's the next, Adrian Peterson. I truly believe that. I think Breece Hall is a really good player. I don't buy into him getting 96 targets. I think if Breece Hall's getting 96 targets in your offense, that means you had a broken offense. Kind of like a few years ago when we saw Najee Harris get like 70 catches. It's just not sustainable for Breece Hall. Bijan, he's been known to be a pass-catching running back. Breece Hall, not so much. Not saying he can't do it, but I expect Breece Hall to be more in the, kind of Joe Mixon range where he's like a 40 reception kind of guy. I don't think he's going to come back out and be a 76, almost 100 target guy. If that's your offense, I just think it's wrong. So for me, I'm taking Bijan Robinson over Breece Hall. Next up for me is pick 8 and 9 overall. So our last first round selections here. We have wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 6, Amon-Ra St. Brown and A.J. Brown. And this one comes down to me is just pure, what do you want from your wide receiver 1? If you want consistency, it's got to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, last year, the guy was pure electric. He plays in a receiving core with, what seems to be a really awesome, situation there in Detroit. They're up and coming, and there's not a lot of battle for targets. It's Sam Laporta, and of course, it's, Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield. But true receiving weapons, it's really Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. But then when you kick it over to the A.J. Brown side of things with the Philadelphia Eagles, I mean, you have Dallas Goedert, who's a good tight end. You have Saquon Barkley now, who's known as a pass-catching running back, big time. You have Devonta Smith, who I think is a really good player, should be a number 1 on his own team if he could just get there. So you have these teams where you have the complete opposite sides. You have A.J. Brown, who is more the high-end, touchdown, big play type of receiver, but who's, has to kind of battle for more catches each game, more targets. They have more weapons there. And then you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who isn't much of a field stretcher, but is just the PPR pepper monster. I mean, the guy is awesome. So I think I don't think you have a wrong choice, but what do you want from your wide receiver 1? Do you want a consistent player that is probably going to get 10 plus targets every game? maybe he won't have the crazy yardage. Amon-Ra St. Brown will never be the 1,600 yard receiver, but A.J. Brown can be because he's that good. If you want the, every weekly winner, I think it's A.J. Brown. But if you want the consistent, I know that Amon-Ra is never going to finish with like a 5-pointer type of receiver, then it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Look at yourself internally, dig deep, and figure out what you want from your wide receiver one. All right, so now let's kick it to another wide receiver group. This is the group of receivers that really is going to make or break your fantasy football season. And it comes down to pick 17, 18, 19 overall. So you're looking at a mid to late second round pick at wide receiver 11, 12, and 13. And Chris Olave, Drake London, and Nico Collins. These three guys are all very talented. And I think that's where we're at this point of these guys, other than Nico Collins last year, haven't really done it. They haven't had the wide receiver, 10 season. They haven't done it yet, except for Nico Collins. But you had to add in the caveat of Nico Collins with Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell all being there. So when you break down each guy, they have their red flags. Every player does. Chris Olave is a very talented player, but to me, just isn't utilized correctly in that New Orleans offense. Derek Carr stinks. Derek Carr is a very okay quarterback in the league, but he's never, ever been a very consistent, fantasy quarterback for your fantasy receiver. He's never been a good quarterback for fantasy receivers. Then you move on to Drake London, right? Drake London has never had over 1,000 yards and more than 4 touchdowns in a season. The guy's been pretty much a dud in his career, statistically. Now, on the field, film work, the guy's awesome. He's a jump ball machine. He's a 50-50 1-on-1. He's dangerous, right? But he's played with, Taylor Heineke and just Desmond Ridder. He's played with these really bad quarterbacks. And then we kick it over to Nico Collins. And like I said, awesome breakout year last year with CJ Stroud. Looks like he's in the money situation. But then you have to factor in Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. Right? It's a deep receiving core with a lot of mouths to feed there. So if you had to pick one of these guys to really be your potential wide receiver one, maybe you went running back in the first round and you want to get one of your stud receivers, who are you going to take? And for me, I think it's Nico Collins. And this is why. Drake London has some red flags. And it's not that I think he's bad at all. I think he's a good player. But he just hasn't really even had a decent season yet. He is playing with Kirk Cousins, who I think will bounce back from the Achilles injury, but we have no idea, right? We have no clue. I still think that team wants to just run the ball a ton. I mean, if you have Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, that's huge. And I also think Kyle Pitts just isn't as bad as the tight end as we're making him out to be. He's a 1,000-yard receiver in his career. He's done that before. So I think Drake London can do it, but I just have more faith in Nico Collins. And with Chris Olave, like I said before, it's Derek Carr, man. I mean, Olave has been a good receiver for fantasy at times, but he's never really brought back his ADP. And do we expect anything else to change that offense? Unless they're ready to just make Chris Olave the absolute one and just pepper him with targets week in and week out, I think you're just going to get more of the same of what you got last year, where you'd have games of the 6 for 53, and then you go, oh, man, he just, there's Derek Carr throwing the deep one to Rashid Shaheed. It never seemed to be Chris Olave's turn. I like Olave, I like Drake London, and I like Nico Collins. But if you're going to bet on me, I'm going to bet on the Nico Collins, the guy who's done it. That offense looks like it's on the rise, and just with a quarterback that I super duper trust in CJ Stroud, I think Diggs is going to make it hard for a receiver to really be the 1,500-yard guy. But if I can see Nico Collins just being a touchdown threat week in and week out because he's huge and he's just a good player, I'm just going to go with Nico Collins. All right, and now let's flip over to the quarterbacks. We have a really tight group here as well at pick 59, 60, and 62. Quarterback 7, 8, and 9. And that is Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, and Jordan Love. And this is the hardest group to pick from. And it comes down, once again, for the millionth time, to your personal preference. Do you want the scrambling quarterback? Because they're not here. Jordan Love is probably the most athletic of the quarterbacks that can get you, the 200 to 300 yards, but it's nothing major. So from here, you're looking at guys who are not pure pocket passers, but these guys are going to be more of the quarterbacks who are from the pocket, right? You need the big touchdown season. You need the big yardage season. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it with Joe Burrow. I just think the guy is phenomenal. I mean, if we were starting a franchise today, I think he is in my top 4 of quarterbacks. And I think Joe Burrow is just really special. I think that offense is tailored to him. He has really, really, really great weapons there with Jamar Chase. And I mean, I think T. Higgins is still like, he is frustrating, but he's still a good, talented player when he plays. They drafted Jermaine Burton, who I think is going to be really good. I even like Charlie Jones out of Purdue from last year. So they have some weapons. With Dak Prescott, it's really just CeeDee Lamb and bust, I think, at this point. You have Jake Ferguson, but I think he's more of just a filler tight end. And then Jordan Love is very interesting, too. You know, when you look at Dak Prescott and Jordan Love the past 2 years, or last year, they were the one of 4 quarterbacks to throw for over 30 touchdowns. They both did it. And Jordan Love seems like he might not have a true wide receiver 1 on his team, but he might have one of the deepest receiving cores with, you know, Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks, and Jaden Reed. You know, I'm forgetting someone else too. Romeo Doubs, right? And even Luke Musgraves. And you have running backs out of the backfield. So there's a lot of weapons there. But at this point, I just seen Joe Burrow in the 2 seasons he's played where he's been healthy, finishes the quarterback 4 and the quarterback 8. I'm just willing to bet that Joe Burrow, the guy who went to a Super Bowl, who's just really talented, is just going to be talented no matter what. I don't think there is a true bust factor there that I do feel with Dak Prescott and potentially Jordan Love. You know, Jordan Love's proven it to me once. Dak Prescott always seems to have the up and then the fadeaway season and then comes back. So Joe Burrow for me would be my pick here at pick 59 overall. All right, and then the last players I want to talk about, we're going to kick it back to the fringe first round, second round, that 12-13 turn. So at pick 12 and 13, RBs 4 and 5, Jonathan Taylor and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think this is going to be another really, really difficult choice, and it comes down to your fantasy philosophy on running backs and players in general. Do you want to take the player that's in the better situation, or do you want to take the really talented player? Now, I think they're both talented, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs is special. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is just a more well-rounded player in terms of the pass catching ability, the speed on the outside, the breakaway play ability. I think Jonathan Taylor is a really good player, but I think Gibbs overall might be a better talented, a higher talented player. But we have to think about the situations. Jonathan Taylor is probably going to play on technically a worse team, but the backfield is all to himself. He has really no competition at all, where Jahmyr Gibbs has to battle with a lot of weapons through the air, and David Montgomery is still there and a good player. The only downside with Jonathan Taylor, so at this point, I think you say, well, why wouldn't I just take Jonathan Taylor? But, I mean, if you look at Jonathan Taylor, man, he has missed games in the past, almost every season of his career. I'm going to pull it up right now. It's just, we know that he is obviously awesome, right? We know that he is just a great player, but when he isn't playing, it kills you, man. I mean, in his career, he's played 15, 17, 11, and 10. Now, I know last year he sat out, but he also missed games due to injury. So, at the end of the day, it comes down to this. What do you want? Do you want Jonathan Taylor, who you know is never going to battle for competition? You know he's going to get the touches every week, but it might be a question mark if he stays on the field. Or do you want Jahmyr Gibbs, who's going to be a pass catcher out of the backfield, who is really an aspiring player, like rising player. Like his stock is flying up the board. He's really talented on a really, really good team. You have to decide. Do you want the really talented player on a good team, but with some competition, David Montgomery? Or do you want Jonathan Taylor, who's on a worse team, still a really good player, but has no competition? For me, I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's freaking awesome. And I think that David Montgomery is going to get his touches, but at the end of the day, I just trust Jahmyr Gibbs maybe to stay healthier, to be more productive on a team that's going to be really, really good, and be a pass catcher through the air. Where Jonathan Taylor, I've just seen him get hurt too many times. He sat out before. He's not going to be on a great team with Anthony Richardson. You could lose some goal line touchdowns with Anthony Richardson being, just a big bruiser, quarterback, rusher, Cam Newton style on the goal line. So for me at pick, 4 or 5, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the safe bet. All right, and those were my 5 Would You Rather Fantasy ADPs. If you liked the video, leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more content. Now, let me know down in the comments below, what player would you have taken at the ADPs we talked about? In the first round, would you have taken Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall? It's going to be a very debated, competition ADP style this offseason. It's going to be a, make or break pick for your fantasy team. So you need to choose wisely. Let me know down below who you would have taken in that situation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.